community group shepherds, community group leaders. Why we call you shepherds? What's that all about? And I want us to do that from a passage that makes a lot of sense to do that, that you might not expect. It's Ezekiel 34. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of context. I'm going to talk about what bad shepherds are. I'm going to talk about what good shepherds are. I'll explain some content, some of the things I talked about, and some of the things I didn't get to talk about directly. And then we'll talk about how this applies to how we should lead our groups. First, context-wise, this is written by Ezekiel in the time of the exile. So it's going to talk about them being scattered, and that's because they're not where they should be. Judah is in bondage to Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar's rule. This is a bad time for them. Their poor leadership has led them to a poor place. And so bad shepherds, there's two big things about bad shepherds. First, they're selfish. And second, they don't care for the sheep. So with them being selfish, they're eating the fat. They're clothing themselves with the wool. And they're slaughtering fat sheep. But they're reaping all these benefits, but they're not caring for the sheep. The second thing is they don't care for the sheep. They're not attentive. They're not strengthening the weak. They're not healing the sick. They're not binding up the injured. They're allowing them to wander away and to be scattered, and they're not searching for them. Their job title, literally shepherd. You are to herd the sheep. But they're not. They're passive while their sheep are scattered and then ultimately preyed upon. And God's verdict is this, that they're no shepherd at all. Conversely, good shepherds, right? Good shepherds seek the flock, provide, and ultimately point to God. First, seeking the flock. He's among the sheep. He rescues the sheep. He brings them out. He gathers them together. He seeks the lost and he brings back the strayed. Some of that's might sound a little bit redundant. The passage is really harping on these characteristics of what does a shepherd do. That's what good shepherds should do. And they should provide, right? They should look after the best interest of the sheep. And that looks like feeding them. That looks like making them lie down. That looks like binding up the injured and strengthening the weak. And ultimately, this points to God. In what way? The Lord will be their shepherd. The Lord judges between the fat sheep and the lean sheep. The Lord will provide David to be their shepherd, to rule over them. And he says this, "You are human sheep of my pasture," declares the Lord. And so let's look at that, a couple of these content things first. Shepherd. Shepherds are poor leadership will be replaced with godly leadership in a Davidic king, but ultimately with God himself. There's all this location imagery. It's because they aren't where they should be, right? But God is going to bring them back into where they should be so that they can dwell securely. He's going to break the yoke of slavery. He's going to break that yoke and deliver them from the hand of those who enslaved them. He will feed them on the mountains of Israel. He's going to bring them home. Who are the sheep? The sheep are the people of the house of Israel. The sheep are God's people. We can apply this to literal Israel. We can apply this to the people that God has entrusted us to shepherd, who are God's people, right? And then peace. There's going to be this time after the exile, but ultimately this peace will be fulfilled fully in the time of the future millennium. Okay, so what do we get? What does this have to do with servant leadership, right? Some of you are tracking and some of you guys aren't, and that's okay. Let me help you out. There's 4 things with servant leadership I want us to point out. First, humbly sacrificing. You're placing yourself low so that you can sacrifice, so that you can care for the needs of the sheep. You have to smell like the sheep if you're going to be humbly sacrificing. You're putting yourself right there in the mess, saying, I'm going to get in the mess with you so that I can look after your best interests. So you humbly sacrifice so you can look after the best interests of the sheep. 2, relentlessly initiating. You're seeking out, you're gathering, you're rescuing your sheep from destruction. You're initiating over and over and over. Even when it doesn't seem like they want it, you're in their lives and you're in their face when you need to be because you're relentlessly initiating. 3, you're intentionally differentiating. What does that even mean? You're helping different sheep navigate out of different difficult situations differently. Are you sick? Let me help you. Are you weak? Let me encourage you to rest. You're saying, what do you need and how can I help you do that? How can I help you take your next step spiritually? How can I care for you? How can I love you right where you are? And finally, you lovingly protect, both from bad sheep and from bad shepherds. That's what a servant leadership does. Humbly sacrificing, relentlessly initiating, intentionally differentiating, and lovingly protecting.